Hello, and welcome to episode number 19 of Fast Casual, Landed's official podcast, brought to you live today, Wednesday, December 6th, from two places, New York City and Utah. Actually, I never confirmed that. Was it Utah you're in
Yeah,
today?
it is Utah.
I was like, you said last week. My name's Alex Mann, and I'm your host again, and it's great to be back. I feel I'm doing lots of episodes lately. As I like to say, every restaurant has a story. And so without further delay, I'd like to get this show on the road. I'm delighted to say that I'm chatting with Dok Kwon today, President and CEO of Cupbop. Doc, say hi.
What's going on?
Love that. I'm actually delighted to get you on, man, because there's like so much energy from our chats and the business is phenomenal. So before I guess we jump into it, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience and just let everybody know what you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm Doc. I'm currently the president and CEO of Cupbop. I joined Cupbop 4 years ago as a partner. Just a little bit about myself. I am from Korea, South Korea. It's funny, probably up until 15 years ago, when people say, when I used to say I'm from Korea, a lot of people used to ask South or North. So I just thought I'd bring that up. But South Korea, came over to the U.S. Now it's almost 25 years ago. That's actually crazy to think. When I was 11, I moved over to the U.S., went through school here. After college, I went into finance, spent about just under 3 years at Goldman, doing investment research. And then after Goldman, I joined the hedge fund Citadel, where I was an investor running an industrials portfolio for about 4.5 years. And, at that time, I was really just I was just itching to try something new, something more entrepreneurial. And thought, hey, if I don't do it now, I probably will just stay in finance and probably won't make the change and won't have the opportunity to. And you get comfortable, right? And it's hard to kind of make a big move like that. And so I thought the time was right. Never thought I was going to get into food, to be honest. Always thought it was probably going to be another SaaS, fintech type of a company. But, it ended up being food, QSR, and Cupbop. And Cupbop probably is the only food brand I would have joined. I got to know Cupbop as a customer firsthand right before I left for New York. Cupbop started as a food truck back then, and we overlapped a few months, and I was an avid fan of Cupbop. I think it was Thursdays they used to come once a week, and I'd be there. I'd be the first one in line. Just love their kind of.
The truck would come up outside your office.
Yeah, love the food. Love the energy that they had. It was just such a unique concept, and myself being both Korean, but also having, kind of the U.S. side of me living, having lived here for now the majority of my life, I have a pretty decent understanding of kind of not only both cultures, but just kind of the different palettes of the cultures. And it worked really well on me. And so, I was going to that food truck until I left for New York. And I thought that was it.
Yeah.
And then when I was looking for this new kind of venture, kind of next chapter that I was going to try, and my thinking was pretty simple. A lot of people thought I was crazy. And my thinking was, hey, I'll if there's something really exciting, even if it's a lot of risk, where it seems like a lot of risk.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't that much risk because I do it and I'll just come back, if it doesn't work out. So, what's the big risk in that? So I decided to join Cupbop, and it hit home because it's Korean cuisine. I'm Korean.
Yeah.
There are currently no Korean concept, national QSR brand in the States, globally for
Yeah.
that matter, really. And Panda really is the only even Asian QSR brand that's major. And so I thought the market opportunity was good. We had an awesome product. And so joined 4 years ago and have been running with the company since.
That's I loved how you kind of got into that there, because it is a kind of great story to talk about. I think like a lot of people kind of forget that, like you don't necessarily have to like have a sort of QSR background to be in QSR, but at the same time, I think separates people from what separates people from being good and great in hospitality is actually just having a love for the product,
Yep.
and a love for like hospitality. And I've like, I mean, I've had, I feel, I was laughing to Vivian, the CEO, the last recently, and I was like, I've done like so many versions of this podcast now. I've interviewed
Yeah.
like 19 formal, long form kind of like leaders like yourself. And what I've definitely kind of come around to as just my sort of hot take, so to speak,
Yeah.
is, like the good and great concepts can be copied. Like, as in,
Yep.
somebody can create a food truck tomorrow and try to do like what you guys are doing, but there's so many locations. What do you think is like the difference maker that lets you scale, whereas like a copycat doesn't? I
Yeah.
mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm curious
Yeah.
your
No,
take.
that's a great question, and the question that I think about all the time, because at the end of the day, and that's one reason, people consider, the food industry in general to be very tough.
Yeah.
From the investors' eyes too, really, and a few factors. One of them is that the barriers to entry is low, right? And a great example of that is Cupbop. Cupbop did start from a food truck, and we are where we are now. So, and the second is obviously the operational intensity, as well as even capital intensity if you're not going the franchise route. Specifically for Cupbop, like you said, people can copy our concept, have very similar food, very similar operations, relatively small foot
Yeah.
space, square footage, efficient on labor, things like that. And those ideas are all over everywhere, and that's fine. Really, the moat that we have is, at the end of the day, the brand. The brand is something that isn't created overnight.
Yeah.
And it isn't something that, you can just create in a short amount of time with, really clever, funny TikTok videos or Instagram. It is just molded over time.
Yeah.
And I love your question on it, because a few weeks ago, I think 3-4 weeks ago now, I was out there in Oklahoma, at one of our grand openings in the city of Moore with our founder Jung and I, and we had that grand opening $5.99 Cupbop special banner, and our founder Jung had that banner with them, and he was dancing with that banner outside the
Yeah.
restaurant all day, like 7 hours. And that is what creates the brand, because that
Yeah.
flows down through to the organization, and to the people. Because at the end of the day, brand can have its messaging, this and that, but for it to have longevity and for it to work, it actually has to be genuine and authentic,
Yeah.
where the customers can take it. And that's something that people can't create overnight. And that's really the moat that we have.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I definitely, and it's funny because I've interviewed lots of your peers in the sense that people have like 100+ locations that are in sort of operations role or
Yeah.
HR roles. And we talk, I hear a lot about this now, and it's that exact thing. I think like a lot of it stems from that sort of like leadership from the top to really kind of be all in on, like, from an emotional perspective, from an empathy perspective. I think what separates good from great is seeing, like, a love from the founders down. I
Yep.
think if you were to like line up, like, say, the top 20 up and coming, top 50 up and coming chains in the country, you guys included, I would imagine that every single one of them has a founder like yours in whatever niche of restaurant that they're in, because I feel like that is what helps enable, like, because I like to use the phrase. I mean, I used to work in design consulting, and I remember like my CEO, she had a great phrase, and she was always like, "Culture eats process for breakfast." She kept saying it over and over and over again. And we were like in the culture change business, so to speak. So businesses would hire us to help them with culture and design and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think about that a lot ever since I started doing this podcast, because
absolutely,
it's what I honestly can take away from like groups like yourself, chains like yourself. Like, it's all about the culture, and you got such an identity for it as well. It sounds like you're really leaning into sort of that sort of Korean. I don't want to say like Korean opportunity, because that sounds like weird. I mean, like, you mentioned Panda Express. When you said Panda, you meant Panda Express, like,
yes, absolutely,
in case it's like another restaurant I've never heard of. I was like, it's like, what has happened? But you mentioned these other ones, and like how you see like a market gap for it as well. Like, it seems to me that you're kind of in this amazing sort of like kind of almost like a cyclone at the moment, a cyclone of like opportunity. Like, where it's really happening for you.
Right. Yeah. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, in that it's great to be that first mover.
Yeah.
There's a lot of white space that we can go after, and that's certainly an advantage for us. Thing that does make it, obviously tougher for the first mover, is that we got to create the market in a way. And we got to continue to have that education process, because people are just not familiar with our food. I do think the macro environment is very favorable for us, and we do have tailwind on our backs, given the popularity of, I think, Korean culture, including K-pop, movies, media, and that down the road translates also into food as well, and that's something that will stay, and it will be a very powerful force for us, right? So if you look at the food scene, and the specifically the Asian cuisine scene, even here in the US, you'll see like Thai food is very popular, right? You see Thai food almost in every city, right? A lot of Thai food restaurants, right? You'll see Vietnamese pho, right? Everywhere. And if you take a look and think about it, like Vietnam, Thailand, these are still developing countries where necessarily they don't have the biggest, kind of that influence globally, right? And yet their food is here and here to stay. And Korea kind of really never had that chance in the US until recently. And if you get that, and the kind of cuisine that resonates with the people here, and you have that cultural push along with that, it's going to be very, very powerful. And it's not going to be a short-term trend. It's just beginning. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and that's definitely it. And I guess like you're cultivating that sort of fan group as well. Like, I mean, you guys are like almost like online sensations as much as like your food is sensational. I guess like when you think about like cultivating that sort of community, like it's not just Korean people you want coming for the food. You want everybody to try it. And so how do you think about, the next year or 2 years? You're saying like there's market favorability, or is the market's kind of in your favor at the moment. How do you think about like scaling that community and scaling the sort of the brand, so to speak?
Absolutely. So there's no shortage of opportunity to expand. If anything, we have gone a lot slower than we could have, and that's been by design. We could have opened up, our franchising opportunity several years ago. We decided not to. Even right now, we just started really toying with the idea, and have started talking to some great multi-unit operators. There have been a number of groups that we've talked to that we've walked away from. And And for us, that is because, and you know, our founder and myself, we have a very strong belief that at the end of the day, expansion is important for sure, but location count isn't that important. Sure, it will matter at the end, but I just see that's one of the big mistakes that I think is made, is people just gravitating and focusing so much on location count, and kind of getting to a point where, you know, they go above their skis, and you know, it just doesn't pan out the way that they had thought, right?
Yeah.
And look, the location count will come, and
Yeah.
and a lot of that has to do with kind of that investor mindset that I have, looking at it from an investor's perspective. There are different
Yeah.
drivers in every industry and every you know, business sectors,
Yeah.
and location count isn't one of the drivers, right?
Is
If
that
you can
more of a
generate,
you think it's more of a vanity metric than almost?
no, it's not a
Like,
vanity metric. I wouldn't say that. It absolutely helps with
yeah,
exposure and everything else.
of
It's an
course.
important metric, but I think where people make the mistake is that is the number one thing that they're looking at, and that's on the top of the chart, where the
You need to
first thing they're
judge you as a
talking about,
brand.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's one of the first things that they'll talk about when they talk about, like, for example, right now it's December. Everybody either has or is in heavily, you know, deep into planning for 24, right? And for a lot of the teams, I think the first thing they'll talk about is, okay, what's the expansion plan looking like next year? What's the location count that they're looking? What's the location, you know, new additions?
Yeah.
And sure, we touch on that, but that's not going to be our main focus. And the way I look at it, location count you can always get, and you can get that with money.
Yeah.
And money and capital at the end of the day is commodity. That's not what makes us special.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the brand that makes it special. And I'd rather have our existing stores do much better and only open 10 stores than have 50 stores that open and are less attractive than we think. Right? So that's kind of
Yeah.
that mindset.
So that's interesting because that kind of probably leads into kind of one of the key topics that we were planning to talk about, which is, you know, your sort of franchising strategy decisions that you have, you know, which is like, you know, how do you think about like individual franchising versus multi-unit operators? How do you think about like selecting partners? And then obviously there's like the financing of types of partners and all that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
like, how do you, like, your perspective, give us a hint into your perspective.
Yeah, that's something that I had been honestly just wrestling with in my head for a while, until we came up with the decisions that we have recently. Is, number one, do we franchise or not? You know, and kind of the several different factors that go into the equation is, one factor is, you know, is it a great franchisable brand? The answer is absolutely yes. Why? Yeah. It has relatively low investment cost, great returns, operations is, relatively speaking, pretty simple compared to a lot of the other brands. And so it kind of checks all the boxes, right? For that. So is it a franchisable brand? Absolutely. But ironically, because it checks those boxes, in a way, it's like, is it better kept as a corporate model, right? Yeah. You know, because there are the pros and cons of franchising. Franchising, the biggest, obviously, pro is, you know, the you get to the burden on capital, right? The capital intensity really goes, which is great, and the speed. The trade-off is that you start losing some control, because the every operator you choose have to kind of believe in the brand just like the franchisor does, and have to operate in a way for it to be cohesive and to be able to scale. And also, number two, sure, the returns are better on franchise units, given there's really no upfront, you know, capital outlay, But if the payback period is short, then we'd rather be collecting 25% plus on margins rather than collecting the royalties, right? Once we get to that payback period, and the payback period is relatively short. And so it's absolutely a franchisable brand, but we also have what it takes to just go corporate model. And that, and if we wanted to, I guess the halfway answer would be if we wanted to do both while taking the corporate route to solve the capital, intensity kind of piece, we'd probably go raise capital and do it that way, which is a viable way. Absolutely.
So it sounds to me, just like hearing that like, given the relatively simpler operational model than other type of franchise businesses that you're thinking of, that lends itself more to a sort of corporate scaling program.
It could,
it's just this like, I'm curious, like, because like, say other brands that kind of look like, I don't want to say look like you, in the sense that like other brands that kind of have gone sort of, multi-unit or individual versus the corporate route, that I would have a similar operational model to you.
Yeah.
Like, do you like spend your time kind of looking at other like franchises or groups?
Yeah, I look at all models.
What do you think is going on there?
I look at all models, our peers, industry leaders, and we ultimately decided to kind of try to find best of both worlds, where we said, okay, we'll only work with multi-unit franchisees, and we want to work with proven, very solid multi-unit franchisees, while continuing to expand our corporate footprint. So corporate stores will continue to build. That's not going to stop. Because they are the most profitable stores that we have. And on the franchising side, that's why we're very picky with who we want to work with and who we partner up with, because it's a long-term relationship. And the biggest criteria is just operational excellence and their experience in operations, because I do believe that will make us better. There's a lot that we, I'm sure, absolutely can learn from great operators, right? I don't pretend to know what I don't know. And there are there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit inside the business. And we hope to learn from the best in the industry, because the brand has what it takes to make all the parties happy, in my opinion. And so, while continuing to open and operating corporate units, partner up with great franchisees, multi-unit, that can also, teach us and help us get better, and also help with the speed and the exposure piece of it, like we talked about.
Sorry, I was coughing and I didn't want to cough on the mic.
No, you're good.
I was like, oh, and you finished talking. I guess my question to you is then, how do you go about finding the operators? Like, are you manically looking for them, or are you getting lots of inbound? Like, how are you sourcing these great people to pick up your brand?
No, great question. So we went to one conference, one kind of franchise conference, the multi-unit franchising conference in MUFCO back in April. That was kind of our first conference that we went to see, kind of check out the scene, meet the players, get to know the industry people. That was in Vegas, and we had a great time. And we've had a lot of inbound.
That was the multi-unit franchising conference.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually
we have had
next year.
So we'll be there again. And we've had a lot of inbounds from that. To be fair, we haven't been really out there trying to sell our franchise yet. But there has been enough flow of parties contacting us where we've been busy on that side.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's almost like, you want to have as much of like an operator fan base as you have an actual
Yeah,
fans for the like, the actual food itself. You want to
yeah.
line around the digital block as much as you want one around the physical block.
Right. And we may speed that up in 24.
Yeah.
But my stance has been, look, if we put our head down, if we're doing what we need to do, the brand and the numbers should speak for, itself. And
Yeah.
I think one fortunate position that we're in is that we're not desperate for franchisees. We don't need franchisees.
Yeah.
We can, if that doesn't work out, we just keep keep building our corporate stores,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing. And I
Do you think
do.
that's the finance guy in you? Like that you're so comfortable with finance and numbers.
Yeah, we are very.
You can look at unit economics differently than say some of your peers, for example.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm the most confident about. This brand is the fact that we have bootstrapped Cupbop from a food truck.
Yeah,
we've not raised money, and if we've been able to bootstrap it, and we know what our return profiles are, and kind of our history of how we got here. Just looking at it through kind of the capital lens, shows us the model itself is viable on its own, and we can continue to do what we need to do, as long as we keep up our performance and all of that. And so that's why I'm a strong believer that people who will recognize us, and it won't take too long.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's funny because I see some parallels with, say, like us at Landed as well, in terms of like capital efficiency and in terms of like scaling appropriately, and like us again, like not having an enormous need to raise enormous amounts of money to scale a software company. So I'm sure yourself and Vivian are very ideologically aligned, and she too has a private equity background, so there must be something there. That was what was triggering my thought.
It's not a bad thing to bootstrap, and look, getting here, this is how I look at it. Getting from a truck to where we are now is way harder than getting from where we are now to 500, 700 units.
That's that's actually so interesting that you say that. I say that in the sense, and I'm like forgetting the person's name, so I'm definitely going to edit this part out, because we had I can't remember his name. He's the CEO of Dave Shot Chicken. He was on the podcast. Oh, definitely editing this part. And he was making the same point. When they were scaling their operation, like they were cooking chicken out of like drums off the side of a highway in Los Angeles. And for them to get into a restaurant and stand up that entire process was something that was like an enormous challenge for them. But now they're like hitting like 100 locations or some number, and they're scaling like crazy. And he was making that point. I mean, he's ex-CEO of Blaze and CEO of Wetzel's Pretzels. I co-founded Wetzel's Pretzels as well. So like he like has that sort of operational background to help them do that. But it's interesting you make the same point, because it's like the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 10.
For sure. Yeah. It's I think it's for any business and almost anything in life, right? Like even building your net worth, the first 100K, 500K is going to be the hardest, right? After that, you start compounding on what you already have, right? So
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I mean, I use that phrase all the time in this job to like everybody. It's like even running this podcast was like a 0 to 1. Like none of us knew how to even do it.
And getting that first guest is always the toughest, right?
It was embarrassing. It was like, if you want to know like the difference between the quality of this one now, like this is being like broadcast in 4K, for example. Now, like there's some of them that we recorded in Google Hangouts that are like so pixelated that you're like, I can't believe we did that.
I love it.
But it was like they got done.
Hey, we all start somewhere, right?
Gotta do it somewhere. And I'll tell you what, man, it's been the best content marketing strategy for anybody related to marketing.
That's awesome.
It's crushing. But irrespective of that, it was actually Bill Phelps was his name. I just had a quick little search there. I was like, podcast lists. Absolute sweetheart of a guy. They should look him up. He's an unreal operator.
Oh yeah, Dave Shot Chicken. They've crushed it. So a lot of respect for any operators who can get that done, that's incredible.
Yeah, totally. And then I guess thinking about like your sort of expansion, because obviously if anybody Googles you listening to this now, they're going to see that not only you kind of, I would say Midwest, but does it count? Is Utah Midwest? Is Idaho Midwest?
Kind of, I think, yeah.
Are they? I mean, they're not the Middle East anyway. What I think is kind of interesting, because you also have all the, remember we were talking about the JV you guys have down in Indonesia.
Yes.
Where you have all your kind of, a lot of locations there as well.
Yeah.
I guess, when I ask you, like, seeing as we're talking about like picking franchises and your strategy and how you think about, like growing, and you mentioned that there was like favorable marketing conditions for you.
Yeah.
Like, how do you see like 2024 like play out for you from an operational and growth perspective? Like, you sound very bullish.
Yeah, we'll continue to expand in our existing markets, as well as we plan to expand into new markets as well. Markets that we're currently in with a lot of growth potential that we'll continue to penetrate into would be, markets like Texas, where we just recently, opened our first store. Oklahoma is another example.
Yep.
Colorado, we plan to be active and grow in Colorado. Utah, there are pockets still that we can grow into. Arizona, we still have a few.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growth opportunity there with a few leases that are already signed as we speak.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
And outside of that, I'm less focused on, and on the franchise side, if we find the right partners that knows the market, I'm sure. And if a great franchisee is looking at a certain market that is outside kind of where we are, look, they know the market better than we do. And that's great. That's the whole point. And so we'd absolutely be open to new markets, assuming that we can, get together with a very strong partner.
Yeah, which are more on the multi-unit side that are multiple, that are very experienced. Well, you never know with this podcast,
Yeah, absolutely. And
the audience this goes to is very much that.
Yeah, I mean, look, like we haven't been really on the multi-unit kind of, journey too long, and we haven't really been, if you're fair, we really haven't been active. But, we have a lot of inquiries on franchise side, a lot. And we've reserved that, individual franchising, franchise units, we do reserve that for our people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways that we really motivate our people, because they love the brand. They know the brand better than anyone. They know what our brand is capable of.
Yeah.
And actually, just last month, we were able to kind of grant that first individual franchise unit to one of our people here.
That's unbelievable. Do you provide the financing for them as well, or they have to get?
Well, we provided the essentially, we set up kind of the banks, all of that for them to do it. But a lot of the people inside the company, that is what, that's the big picture for them, is for them to operate their own Cupbop unit. And
it's an incredible thing. And again, not to like keep saying, I keep hearing from all your peers also, but the best of your peers offer that as a way to like give back and create that type of ownership culture.
Yeah.
I think especially one of the things I've definitely heard over the last, say, whatever, I've done millions of these episodes, is like post-COVID in particular, a type of like managerial class kind of left where, went to whatever, they probably have families, not your Gen Z, your manager. And so we're trying to like replace them by like training and designing sort of retention policies for people. And one of the things that I'm hearing above and beyond is that there was a reset in terms of culture, norms, behaviors by lots of franchises and restaurant groups.
Yeah.
And what, like, obviously like the Bear and Anthony Bourdain sort of Kitchen Confidential, like toxic work environments were kind of like put to bed. I think finally, as a sort of like, this is what the industry is like. It does not need to be that.
Yeah.
But building on that, like some of the best that I've heard is like that, is like creating opportunities for staff who live and breathe your brand to like have a potential to have an ownership.
No, absolutely, because they love the brand and
Differentiator in the extreme.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, a lot of our people that are with us currently, got the opportunity to work with us, and they reached out to us, wanting to be a franchisee, and we said, "Hey, sorry, we don't franchise." And they say, "I love your brand. Is there any way I can work with your brand?" Right? And our first franchisee, who just opened, that person, Mike, same way, 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
He reached out and said, "Hey, I would love to be a franchisee of your brand." And we said, "Sorry, we don't franchise." And he said, "I love your brand. Is there anything I can do to work with you guys?" And we had an opportunity to work together, and he's really proven himself, and he never stopped asking. And he said, "Yeah, I think it's a great example. We're rolling this program out anyway, and it'd be great." And so, he just opened up his first store, and I'm very thankful and grateful that the store is doing very well, and he's going to do very well with it. So
that's awesome. And I think, on that lovely note, I think we can end the episode and the podcast. Doc, I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
Like, so enlightening. I mean, listening to you there and just seeing the smile on your face as well when you're talking about it is just like phenomenal.
Thanks, brother. That was fun.